Welcome back to the Christian Century YouTube channel. I'm John, joined today by one of our writers, Marc Loustau, who has written a new essay for us called Can This Far-Right Christian Militia De-Radicalize? The Christian militia in question is the Bratstvo Battalion in Ukraine. We're going to be talking about far-right extremism, but before we dive into all that, please like this video, subscribe to our channel. And Marc, for anyone out there who doesn't know you, can you tell us who you are?
Sure. I am a journalist and a scholar of religion. I wrote this piece while I was based in Budapest, Hungary, at Central European University's Institute for Advanced Study, where I held a fellowship this past year. And I reported this piece from Ukraine, from the front line. But it is truly a joy for me to publish for the Century. It's one of my favorite organs.
Thank you, Marc. This piece just covers a fascinating battalion in Ukraine, the Bratstvo Battalion. You talk a little bit in the piece about how it came together. You got permission to go to a command center, but there were these stipulations. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about how this came together, this story.
I actually first heard about the Bratstvo Battalion through a contact, a friend, an acquaintance who's a Protestant minister in Ukraine, and actually somebody who I wrote about and featured in a previous article for the Century. He posted about the Bratstvo on his Facebook page, and I sort of followed a trail about this battalion, doing some research online, contacting a few friends who were scholars of far right wing extremism in Ukraine, and this is sort of where the origins of the article came from. And then to actually meet with the commanders and go to their command center, I simply reached out to their press contact. It was that simple. In some ways, these groups, by virtue of the pressure that they're sort of being put under by the Ukrainian government to present themselves in a more friendly light, in a more de-radicalized light to the West, they have very extensive press operations and are very open to meeting Western press journalists like me. And so I reached out to their press officer by virtue of their website, got a phone number, and that's how we arranged the meeting.
One of the reasons this battalion is so well known and sort of controversial is that they have a well documented history of far right extreme actions, words, and you give a good summary of that in the piece. But they've gone from an independent battalion to like official military for Ukraine, and so maybe there's a little bit of a reform project with their image. But the picture you painted of the religious dimension of this battalion was so complex, and they have an official Orthodox identity, but there's these evangelical and Catholic clergy coming through. There's chaplains, but the chaplains report the soldiers if their faith isn't strong enough. I wonder if there's just any other observations you want to add as you reflect on the religious identity, practices, the faith of the people in this battalion.
The sort of eclectic Christian mix that I saw and learned about while doing research about the Bratstvo, the analogy that might make sense to the Century's readers is the eclectic mix of Christian symbolism that we saw in amongst the rioters on January 6th at the Capitol building. It's broadly Christian, but there are certain pagan elements that sort of mix in there. And in terms of the Christianity that you see, it's again sort of ecumenical, but very much bound by a right-wing ideology and political orientation. So if you think about the faith that was present during the riots on January 6th, that is in some ways a similar kind of eclectic mix as the faith that I saw as I was doing my reporting about the Bratstvo. Just concretely, when I was in their command center, I did the interviews underneath icons of the Virgin Mary and Jesus. These were pictures on the wall, very standard issue, mass produced, images of Jesus and Mary, and they were looking at us, me and the commander and the other press officers and the other enlisted folks, as we were talking. And so that was, it was certainly Christian symbolism was present in the actual spaces where I was doing the journalism, and then the faith itself, as people explained what their backgrounds were and how they prayed, and the role that faith played in the very everyday work of this battalion. That was also clear and present, but nothing like, as you said, nothing like I at least had ever seen in my previous reporting in Ukraine. The example that I give in the piece is, chaplains that I had spoken to in all throughout the Ukrainian army, and I've done several different articles about chaplains in the official Ukrainian military. There's a strong emphasis on therapeutic healing. That is the absolute mainstream dominant 99% approach that chaplains use in the mainstream Ukrainian military is therapeutic healing, helping soldiers deal with moral injury and various different other kinds of trauma. And then, as just a complete departure from that, I interviewed chaplains for the Bratstvo who talked about how their main role was to figure out if soldiers were wavering in their faith, and if they were, they would be strongly encouraged to move on to a different unit in the Ukrainian military. I don't want to call it like a mirror image or a flip side world or a bizarro world of Ukrainian military practice in contrast to what I'd typically seen, but it was quite different.
Well, I wanted to ask you finally about the end of the piece that you wrote, where you make some connections between what you've learned studying Bratstvo Battalion and the situation in the U.S. with far-right extremist groups. A bit of a pessimistic take, if I do say, reading the end of the essay. You kind of say, look, singing Kumbaya, doing potlucks, it's not going to get it done to build bridges with these far-right folks. I wonder what you might say is a takeaway when you look at the situation in Ukraine. What might some lessons be for Christians in the U.S.?
So if we're looking at the question, is the Bratstvo Battalion de-radicalizing? Can it de-radicalize? The only way that it is de-radicalizing now is under pressure from a pro-Western, pro-pluralism, and pro-diversity state government, that being the Ukrainian government. Under the auspices of the Ukrainian military, the Bratstvo Battalion is being pressured to de-radicalize. What we are seeing in the US right now, what ICE is essentially state-sponsored far-right Christian nationalism. It is the Proud Boys, but under the auspices of the US federal government. The question of what will de-radicalize the Proud Boys, what will de-radicalize these other groups that we are seeing as the shock troops of Christian nationalism, state-sponsored Christian nationalism, what will de-radicalize them? In my mind, the tools of 1990s, 2000 era US, and especially the preferred tools of organizations like Interfaith Action that sort of date to the Obama era or even the Clinton era as tools of building bridges across political divides or tools of de-radicalization, that won't work because we're confronting a very different animal. We're confronting state-legitimized, state-sponsored Christian nationalism, and we need a greater level of force and coercion in order to accomplish de-radicalization of that kind of element in American society. And so I was sort of, taking to task a particular kind of impulse within progressive Christianity to reach back to a period when it felt like multiculturalism was the answer, and that if we just all sat around and sang some nice songs and ate a nice potluck meal, we could really just all get along. And that doesn't seem to be an effective means for dealing with the Proud Boys wearing ICE uniforms.
Mm. Well, a lot to think about, maybe a lot to lament. But thank you for writing this piece and for chatting today, Marc. Anyone out there who missed this article, the link will be below in the video description, along with a link to Marc's Substack. So if you like this piece, go read more of Marc's writing. Thank you so much for talking today.
Thank you, John.